Hi, Peter.
Hi, Red.
Thanks for being here with me. This is our first episode about you and your painting. I'd like to start off by asking you a few basic questions, for people to get to know you as Peter.
My name is Peter Farrington. It's Sunday, March 9th, 3 days before my birthday, and I'm very happy to be here with you to have a conversation about my art.
I met you 3 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was at Muhammad's farm, his display in Sharjah. And you were a little bit late arriving, and everybody else was gathered around the table looking at all the goods, some of the products that he had grown already. And you showed up, and I went, oh, now there's an interesting person. I wonder about you. And of course, since then, we've got to know each other quite well. Muhammad brought us together, and obviously for creative reasons and other reasons. So, yeah, it was really nice, and you've been a really good friend since.
Oh, thank you. What was the first thing I said to you at Muhammad's farm?
Boy.
Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. Was it hello?
No, I remember I said that you looked like an artist.
Really? Wow.
Do you remember? And it was your hat and the way that you were dressed.
Okay.
Do you remember that at all?
Now I remember this because just yesterday when I went to this other event to give a little chit-chat, it was like a coffee table, round table, the host said something very similar to me.
Wow.
She said, as soon as I saw you, and I was the only man there, and yesterday was International Women's Day, and she said, I hope you don't mind, we're all ladies here. And I said, I'm fine, I'm comfortable with that. And then I was explaining who I am in terms of my left brain, right brain, and I'm primarily right brain as this assessment showed, and it makes sense to me, which is more the feminine energies. So she said, I could sense that right away about you. So it's nice when you get these kind of comments, like what you made back 3 years ago.
Yeah, and lo and behold, you are a painter, but you had told me that you hadn't long picked up a paintbrush. Could you tell me more about that?
Sure. When I was younger, like most kids probably, I watched my mother. She liked to paint and sketch when she had time, but she had 5 children. And my dad was usually overseas, so she was taking care of everything while he was away, so she didn't have that much time. But I watched her, and I became curious about drawing, and I used to do it once in a while as well. But I would say it would be 40 years between the time I stopped picking up a paintbrush or anything like that, or pens, and then when I started. And that was when I moved to Oman back in 2008. And really that was completely unplanned, completely unexpected. I was on a big adventure, moving to the other side of the planet to a country I'd never even heard of before, like three months earlier, and suddenly there I am. So I have a lot of things to get used to, and this very interesting feeling kind of occurred as a result of, I would say, 2 significant experiences. Really opened me to this notion that I need to be doing something differently. I didn't know what it was, and then one day suddenly it came to me while I was getting my hair cut. You need to start painting, Peter. And I actually went right away after I got my hair cut, to the surprise of the barber, because I announced it out loud. I went and got all the stuff, and I didn't even know what I needed, but I went into the art store, and there were other people there picking up supplies, and I didn't want to be seen to be not knowing, so I just grabbed in a way, pretending I knew what I was picking up, and I ended up bringing all the art supplies home to my villa, and I put them in the back corner and left them there for months, because I thought just by taking that step, that feeling that I had of painting would kind of ease, but it didn't.
Right, and where were you in your life at that point? Like, how old were you? What was your job?
So I was 52 years old when I moved to Oman. I had been a bureaucrat in Ottawa for the Environment Ministry for quite a few years. I worked for the federal government for about 22 years. I had done some really interesting things, some very challenging things. And one of the last ones that I had done was to co-chair a workshop in Iceland for the Arctic strategy in front of the Arctic Council. I was asked to do that my second day on the job when I had shifted to coastal section for Environment Canada. And I accepted to do it because it gave me a chance to go to Iceland. And this opened up my whole mind and my whole idea. I got to do more international. I have to. And then a few months later, things started to unfold to enable me to come to this part of the world. So I went from a bureaucrat to where I received an invitation right out of the blue to be the environmental advisor to the Sultanate of Oman for the creation of a brand new city from scratch. And I thought, how can I turn something like that down? I mean, how often does somebody get an offer like this, unsolicited? And so I said yes. A few weeks later, maybe 6 weeks later, I was on a plane, my family left behind, and I'm landing in Oman. The door opens, plus 52 degrees outside. It was like, wow, a wall. I'd never even experienced plus 40 in my life, and this is 52. So I knew my life was going to be changing, and I thought, what did I do to myself? But I just walked into it knowing that I made this decision, I made this choice. I was drawn, definitely, to Oman and to this part of the world. And I just kept that kind of same attitude, open-minded and forward-looking, and it's been fantastic ever since, really.
And where did you grow up?
Born in Canada. My youth, because my father was in the Air Force, we moved every 2 to 3 years. So I was born in Nova Scotia in the Maritimes. And we lived between, up until about the age of 10 or 12, between Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Montreal. So we just sort of moved between those three places. And then I remember the big move when we moved from Prince Edward Island to Toronto. And Toronto was like going into this place that was completely magical. I'd never seen really tall buildings before. I mean, in Montreal, I was very young, so I never went much further than the neighborhood. But when we turned down Yonge Street in Toronto, which is the main street, all these buildings going up 30, 40 stories, it was incredible for me. But I lived everywhere. After my parents settled in Ottawa, I did my undergrad, or part of my undergrad in Ottawa at Carleton University. I then started to, because it's in my blood, it's in my family blood to be moving all the time. So I couldn't sit still. So every summer I would fly somewhere. So I would go out west to Western Canada. Then very soon I was going into Northern Canada, having these incredible adventures. And that's the first time actually when I went into Arctic Canada where I felt a special energy that one gets when you're in a certain place that in a way resonates with you very, very much. In Canada, they call it the Call of the North. I'd read about this in like poetry from Robert Service, but I'd never really experienced it. I was up in a place called Tuktoyaktuk, which is right on the Arctic Ocean. I even swam in the Arctic Ocean when I was up there. It's very cold. But I was up there for no more than 3 weeks. And when I got back to Ottawa to continue my education, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I had to get back up. And I had that second experience, energy-wise, like this for a place when I went to Dukum in Oman, that same kind of energy. But I lived all over Canada. I used to take off in the summer times. I picked tobacco in southern Ontario. I worked at a gold mine in Yellowknife, or just outside of Yellowknife on an island. And I loved adventures, basically, is what it comes down to.
What happened that day that caused you to paint your first painting?
So I was about 10 days in Oman, still getting used to the languages, the heat, the way people were dressed, the way people acted. It was such a different place for me. And my eyes were very wide open, but I wasn't nervous. I was just extremely excited, but there was a lot to take in. And I don't have a very good sense of direction. I don't have a very good memory for names and places. And I've known this for my entire life, which means my subconscious mind is extremely accessible to me. And it's active all the time. So I walked into a mall, and I'm taking in this space. And at least malls to me were familiar. They're Western. So that's the place at least I could sort of transition between my new life and my old life, because it had a bit of both to it. So I was walking through the mall. It would be probably early June, I would say. So it was quite hot outside. And I was just watching all the people. And at the end of the mall, there was a woman standing outside the mall, outside the shop that she managed. And she was looking in the other direction, but there was 30, 35 people between her and me. So I didn't really pay specific attention to her. I just noticed her as I'm walking through the mall towards or in her direction. She was looking the other way, and at some point she turned her head and looked in the direction I was coming from. Our eyes at some point again met. I don't even recall how they met, but they did, which is the normal way it happens when you're gazing. At that moment, I just had one of the most incredible experiences of my life, and I've never had this ever since. The whole end of the mall, radiating from her, was a silver white light. It was cone-shaped, starting from the middle of her torso upwards to the ceiling. It was a brilliant, shimmering light, and I was stunned. I kept walking, and of course I couldn't stop but stare at her. And I couldn't see the shops behind her. The light was bright. It was brilliant, but it wasn't blinding. And I thought, what is going on? And I looked around at other people, and they couldn't see what I was seeing, only me. So I continued to walk towards her, and eventually she noticed that there was this weird guy kind of staring at her, and she turned and looked the other way. The moment she did, the light disappeared. I walked by, took one more glance, and I went, wow, who are you? And a few days later, maybe 5 or 6 days later, I got this tingling between my shoulder blades in the back. And this tingling stayed with me for a long, long time. It felt nice, but it was tangible, really noticeable. It's kind of like tickling, but it was very, very unusual experience. And I thought, what is this? And I used to wonder about it. What is this? What's going on? And then I got the chance, because I'm working as an advisor, environmentally speaking, for this development in Duckham. I was taken down to actually see the place. And my colleagues in the vehicle said, oh, Peter, we should take you to this pile of stones here because, it seems to be important to some people. And you're the environment guy, so go have a look. So when I stepped out, it was a place they were calling the Stone Park. And I didn't like that name. And I knew right away I didn't like the name, because when I stepped into this place, which I called the Rock Garden to me is much more dynamic, much more alive. And this place was alive. It had incredible energies, incredible forms, the shapes. It's a 46 million year old ancient reef structure. It's stunning. It's incredible. And when I walked in there, my one colleague who I saw just about 6 months ago in Oman, he told me, he said, Peter, you probably said wow 30 times between the time you got out of the vehicle and got into the rock garden. It was amazing for me. And so it was these two experiences really that eventually I figured out that I needed to start painting. I wanted to start painting. And that's when it happened. It was magical. I still, when I think about it now, it's one of the greatest moments of my life, or two moments.
You had this in mind, or did you do it from a picture, or what was it that made you decide to start this particular painting?
First, it had to be about the rock garden. I spent a lot of time wandering around Duckham, but I was always drawn back to the rock garden. And there were some stones there that were just like statues, like sculptures. The whole rock garden, it's 3 square kilometers. It's full of these sculptures. And to me, they were mystical, they were magical, and I was drawn to them. And so the painting behind actually is a compilation of several different photographs that I took, and I combined them. And of course, I put my own, I'm not being a trained artist, I wasn't sure how to replicate colors, but actually this to me was an advantage because it left me free to express what I was feeling the way I wanted to express it. And when I finished the painting, I noticed that there were some very clear indications that the rocks that I had painted looked more like people, or like icons or figures of some sort, maybe mythical creatures. But I noticed that right away. And this is certainly one of the impressions that I got every time I go into the rock garden, is that this sense of it being alive, this sense of it being more than just a pile of stones. There's a lot of stories there, and the mood of the rock garden, because the photos that I took were at different times of the day. And so the feeling you get at different times of the day, dawn versus noon versus night, very, very different. Full moon versus no moon, very, very different. And so I was trying to combine all of these feelings which you sense physically, it's visual, and there's even a smell. And how does one translate in the sound? There was a quietness there because around was all this construction activity, these trucks and dust and things like this. When I was in the rock garden, that all disappeared. It was just very quiet. And so what I wanted to do in part was to create all those feelings visually on the canvas. And that's essentially what that painting represents at the time, as best I could.
So how would you describe your relationship with the rock garden? Not necessarily the painting, but how you associate yourself with that place.
I've always loved rocks. My name means rocks, so my parents chose my name well. When I was living in Muscat, my friends used to complain when I moved from one place to another, not about the furniture, but about all the rocks I had to move. I had a lot. So, yeah, and to me the rock garden is the temple. It's the most special place for me personally I've ever been in. It's in my mind almost daily. I think about it as something for me that's personally quite sacred. I feel that I was drawn to come to Oman, specifically to the rock garden.
You gave me a book about the rock garden and what your role was in that project, which was beautiful.
Well, what happened with that project, it was called Dukum Portraits of Discovery. The rock garden was scheduled to be destroyed as part of the development. The master plan had, for where the rock garden was going to be a multi-lane highway, a utility corridor, and some other things that would essentially destroy everything in that rock garden. And I couldn't believe that they would do this, especially, well, once I met it. Once I was inside, I thought this place it has to be saved. I tried for 1 year to get the government to reconsider their plans, to no avail. One day, a contact and a friend who worked for the Ministry of Economy, is a senior economist, he phoned me and he said, "Peter, they're going to start construction next week." He said, "You've got to give me something if you want to save it." He said, "Give me a note, 2 copies." And he said, "These notes have to explain the importance of the rock garden, how we save it, and what the steps would be involved in that. And I have to send it up to 2 ministers, Minister of Economy and Minister of Finance, and they both have to agree. So give it to me this morning." So I said, "Okay, thanks for calling." So I put together about a 4-page memo, maybe 5, and at the last minute I put photographs from the rock garden as one of the pages. So that was like page 3. I gave it to him and he said, "Okay, I'll send them up. You never know. I'll give you a call if I hear anything." About 2 hours later, he called me back. Only 2 hours. And he goes, "Peter," and his voice was shaking. He says, "I've never experienced this before in my life." And he was probably in the government for 30 years. He said, "I have the 2 documents you gave me. They're signed by the ministers saying we must protect this place. And you're being directed to go to the Supreme Committee of Town Planning to change the plans." It was incredible. So the rock garden was saved. Then I realized, of course, that really the decision makers for Dukum are in Muscat, 600 kilometers away. The people that did the master plan, I don't know how familiar they were actually with Dukum, to be honest. I thought, well, they've had a long time and lots of opportunity to come to Dukum and see it for themselves. Let me bring Dukum to them in Muscat. This is my thinking. So I thought, and I had a really amazing conversation with a friend of mine who I'd met in Dubai, actually. She was introduced to me through a mutual friend in Muscat, and her name is Nancy. And we had this very serendipitous conversation over lunch at the Dubai Creek. I was showing her my new camera, and she goes, "Peter, that's the exact same camera I use." I said, "Really?" And she showed me her camera, same camera. And we started to talk about how it would be so interesting for me and a third person that we had been talking about to go and explore places like Dukum and see what we see how we see differently. And I thought, yeah, that's a really interesting idea. And then right after lunch, we went to a gallery she wanted to show me. She used to work at galleries in Paris when she was doing her Master's of Law, when she was there. And so we stepped into this gallery, and there were three ladies in a room, and they were quite busy setting up paintings. And we said, oh, sorry, didn't mean to disturb you. They said, no problem at all. One lady from, I think, from India, another lady from the UK, and another one, perhaps Emirati. And what they had done is they had gone to different places and painted the same scenes. So we were looking, but we didn't know this. We started to look around when they said, you can have a look. And I was just admiring the paintings. And then they said, I suppose you've noticed. And I said, noticed what? That these are all the same places. And I said, I did admit that I didn't recognize that, but I was stunned. They were so different. They were looking at the same things, but their impressions were completely different. And then I realized, really, we need to have many, many different portraits of Duckham and bring those to Muscat so that the decision makers can really see the richness and diversity and experiences one can have from Duckham, and that we need to be mindful of this when we're planning it and when they're making decisions. So it was at this point I decided, let's try and do that. And I ended up assembling, with the thanks to the Oman Society of Fine Arts, for example, thanks to where I was working, Parts and Sprinklerhof, the Port of Duckham Company, Oman Dry Dock Company, they all got together, and I managed to get about 25 artists from different countries that were either living there or that I brought from Canada, from the US. There was an artist from Brazil, a filmmaker came from Canada. She's an award-winning filmmaker. And we went and explored Duckham. And then I said to them, 4 days, 3 nights. And then I said, 6 months' time, we'll have an exhibition in Muscat, and we'll show what Duckham's all about through your eyes. A friend, his name is Michael Katz, Canadian, still in Muscat, he said, why not give disposable cameras to the school children and ask them to show us what Duckham means to them? I thought, this is really perfect. So I went and visited each school. I talked to the principals. They each had a photography club, which was nice. And I explained my idea. I gave them the cameras. And then we took the photos later back from them and processed them for part of the exhibition, which was going to take place, we had decided. My friend Nuhaila Al-Suleimani, who helped me so much on this project, many people helped. She was really, really helpful on this. And we settled on Beit Musna in Muscat, which was to me the most prestigious gallery in Oman at the time, and in Muscat, of course, in particular. And my friend Roman, who's a photographer and has done many exhibitions in different parts of the world, he processed the children's photos. And at first he was shaking his head, my God. He said the lighting is bad, the formatting is bad, the framing is poor. And he was kind of complaining a little bit about while he was looking through them. And then I noticed he got quiet as he was going through all these photos. He was drawn right into it. He couldn't believe what they saw, what they were showing. And it was a fantastic experience, actually, just to see the children's photos and the impact it had on a very experienced photographer. And this to me was so joyful. It was really wonderful to see the power of art and the power of this kind of almost communication that can happen on a subconscious level, and how it just unfolds inside of you. And this is what happened. So we had the exhibition. The Minister of Environment and Climate Affairs, Mohammed Al-Tobi, he was invited as a special guest, and he brought with him for the opening night undersecretaries from 5 or 6 ministries. I was really surprised. I was really pleased. And they stayed for at least 3 hours, maybe longer. They went through and they talked to every single artist. So we had locals that had never participated in exhibitions before. We had professional artists. We had the school children's photos and paintings. There were sculptures. It was an incredible event for me. I ended up being the largest investor financially for it. It's difficult to find sponsors. The Ministry of Tourism gave me some money, which I was really pleased and surprised about. But it was the best investment of my life, really.
Amazing.
Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. So I'm wondering, did you paint this before all that happened or after?
The painting behind me, actually, I painted for the exhibition.
And how long did it take you? Because it's like your first painting, right?
Yeah.
Or did you have like
It was,
a few trial paintings or?
yeah, it's the first painting I did on canvas, but I'd actually done some other paintings before that on paper
Okay.
because I was kind of curious and I thought I need to start because I bought all the stuff. I need to start painting. And so I did maybe 4 or 5 paintings on paper, and they were all of the rock garden except for one, which was banana trees from another trip that I took. And I just experimented there. And the experience of doing that was really, really, I loved it, actually, because you end up in a different world almost when you're painting.
And are they, so you say 3 are the rock garden and 1 is a banana tree. Were you trying to do one sort of picture that would replicate or become this painting, or were they all different and then you settled to do this one on canvas?
Well, the first one was just, honestly, it was just to see what it's like to put brush and paint to paper. I was just experimenting. I was just trying to see what would happen. I didn't have any specific thing in mind when it came to the canvas behind. They were all individual experiments. It was just me kind of exploring this whole notion of painting, to be honest. And when it came to this particular painting, I used that experience to help me. But it wasn't as though I had planned to. I said, first I'll do 4 or 5 paintings, and then I'll do the one on canvas. It wasn't like that.
So, is there anything you want people to know about this painting behind you?
I suppose when I stand beside people that are looking at any of my paintings, I really like to hear what they have to say, what they see. That's the most important thing for me. For me, paintings, and I knew this when I was introduced to this notion when I was much younger, that paintings really are portals. They're like gateways in a way to one's soul, to another kind of dimension of who they are. And so when I see something and paint something, it has a particular meaning for me, and I see it and I feel it. But other people may see something and experience something quite differently. So how they enter these portals or what they experience could be quite different. So it's not just with respect to this particular painting, but all paintings, particularly original art, not so much prints, but original art. It's got that energy to it. The energy of the artist is in there, and my energy is in there as well. So, the great masters, I was told, people that can see auras, tell me that the auras of the great masters, which most people cannot see, they can. And that's what makes them great works of art, because there's a piece of them energetically, the part of their soul is in that painting. And when you're standing there gazing at it, you're in that field and you're experiencing it. And I know that when I paint, from this very first painting, I've been very open. There's always a part of me in that. And this painting included, you may feel a little bit of me in there and a little bit of the rock garden at the same time. So I hope people get a chance to see it in person and some of my other works, but any works, anybody's artwork, when there's a heart involved in it. And that is the case for most people when they're doing their art. And the freer you are when you're painting, the more open you are, and the more of your energy goes in there. Don't worry about mistakes. I didn't when I was doing this one, and I'm really happy with it. When I look at it now, I still get a really good feeling from it, because it brings back so many memories of my first experiences when I went to Duckham, when I discovered the rock garden. It's really nice. It's a cherished memory for me.
As we're concluding this interview, has another painting come to mind that you would like to talk about next? Or would you like to carry on linearly of the one you actually did next?
It could be the same painting, actually, because the next painting that I did on canvas was when I joined this group several years later. So after I did the Ports of Discovery, I stopped painting because I, in a way, felt I'm done. I've done what I needed to do. I've saved the rock garden. I've revealed what Dukam is to the decision makers. I thought that's why I'm here, and so I don't need to paint anymore. But somebody talked me into, no, you paint. Come and join our group called Fusion Art. And the first painting from Fusion Art is when I really started to explore the way I need to paint and the way I paint now. It's a starting point for me. So that's really the next painting is really a next big jump in my evolution as an artist and as a person.
And what year was this painting?
That painting would have been 2011, the one behind.
And the one that we'll talk about next?
The one we'll talk about now will be either late 2013 or 2014. I just have to find it.
Because how many paintings have you done?
Probably 450 or so paintings. Most of them I still have. Although I did donate one to auction last night for the Terry Fox Foundation. So one less. And that was a great experience for me as well. But most of them I still have. And I've exhibited a lot. But I really didn't have much interest to sell. I just was more interested to people, see how people responded to them, and just to share a little bit of my energy through my paintings as well.
This was fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to the next episode.
Thank you, Red. Me too.
Thank you, and good night, Peter. See you soon.
Okay. Good night.